the multi-talented Ken Rosenthal back here on the show. How are you, Ken?
Very well, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing fine. So let's start with the Red Sox. What makes them so good in your estimation, Ken?
Wow, that's a great question because there's so much about them that I like. I would say most of all, it's their position group. And that starts with the three outfielders and J.D. Martinez. But obviously they've got depth across that roster. Starting pitching has been good. The bullpen fortified by Porcello. They just have a way about them. And I don't know that they're the most talented team. I don't know that they were as talented as Houston in many regards. And Houston had, on paper, the better bullpen, the better rotation. But all season long, they have won games. They figure out ways to win games. They can do it a lot of different ways. And that, to me, is kind of what defines them.
And the birthday boy from last night, Alex Cora, he's got the stuff, man. He just knows what buttons to push. He gets the most out of everybody. What do you think he brings to the equation that makes him so good as well, Ken?
He has a way about him that the players respond to. And if you go back to last year, not to bash John Farrell, but John Farrell was not as loose with the players. He did not give off a relaxed vibe at all. Now, it's not that Cora is relaxed. He's a very intense competitor, but he just has a good way about him. He's honest with his players, open with them. He was a player himself not long ago. So all of that, when combined with his open-mindedness towards the analytical part of the equation that has become such an integral part of everything now, and his ability to communicate that to players and have his coaching staff communicate that to players, that is all part of his leadership too. It's just been, for him, a remarkable run here. And yes, they're a good team, and sure, a manager can only do so much with a good team, but we have seen over the years many times where a manager can screw up a good team, and he has not done that. Quite the opposite. He's brought more out of this club than I think most of us thought.
So coming into this ALCS, Ken Rosenthal, if I had told you one of these two facts, which would have been the more surprising one to you? One is that Jackie Bradley Jr. would be the MVP of the ALCS, or two, David Price would win Game 5 to wrap things up after having a solid Game 2 outing.
I'll add three, that the Red Sox would win in 5 games.
Okay.
Which of those would be the most surprising? I don't know, but all are surprising. Jackie Bradley Jr. is a talented guy, has not been a consistent hitter throughout his career. At times he has really slumped, and people have said, well, he gives them the defense, and that's why he's out there. But as he has shown, he has ability, and at times he gets streaky. But at times when he's hot, he's a very dynamic offensive player. David Price, I always go by the theory, and he tested this theory, that good players eventually find a way to succeed in the postseason. And it goes back to Bonds. It goes back even before him. Bonds, if you remember, struggled in the postseason, and finally, in 2002, figured it out. You give a great player enough chances, they're going to figure it out. But as I said, Price did test that theory. I did not know if it was ever going to end up like last night, and it's so interesting to me that last night he was perhaps put in the worst position he has been put in any of his postseason starts. 3 days rest, warming up the night before, and somehow he found it. And I saw him say after the game that he found something in the bullpen the night before. And whatever it was, the changeup was good, the fastball location was really good, and that was the David Price that we've seen so often in his career.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's been amazing. Before you move on to the NLCS and then the World Series, what is the postmortem on the 2018 Astros, do you think, Ken?
I don't know. And certainly they were a talented group, and in my view, the best team in baseball all year, even though the Red Sox won more games. I thought they had no flaws. You look at the Red Sox, the bullpen is a flaw. They, in the rotation, were vulnerable because Sale had the physical issues. Price was unreliable in bigger games, and Houston just seemed to have it all. They certainly were banged up toward the end. Altuve was not Altuve because of the knee, and that affected them. Correa, he had a good playoff, but during the course of the regular season, he struggled with the back. They're going to be back. They do have a number of free agents, and some of them are kind of core players. Keuchel, Charlie Morton, Marwin Gonzalez. Those are three of the big ones. Brian McCann's another. They're still going to be a powerhouse. It's very difficult to go back-to-back. We know that. It's only happened, well, it hasn't happened since the Yankees, the late 90s, 2000s. So I don't have a clear postmortem because I'm still a little bit stunned. They only won one game in this series. But what shocked me was the middle three games of the five-game set, they allowed, I believe it was 7, 7, and 8. And this was a team that I thought had just brilliant pitching. Shows the depth of the Red Sox lineup and how devastating it can be.
Well, do they have a hit reputationally too, Ken, with what Yahoo Sports reported with this fellow who had a credential from the Astros shooting pictures of opposing dugouts? Ken, is there any there to this? Is there any there here?
Both those things are blemishes. Now, certainly the part about the employee that you just mentioned. Now, baseball has essentially said this matter is closed and they took care of it. Other teams are not happy with that explanation. They think the Astros went too far. I don't know where that goes. The sign stealing thing has been an issue for a while now. I remember writing about it last offseason, just how baseball is installing new phones so they can monitor them. Teams couldn't communicate from the clubhouse to the dugout. And yet, because of the vast amount of electronics available, teams find different ways and do what they do. Now, that was certainly something that if the Astros had won the World Series, people would have wondered, hey, was this okay? And the Osuna thing is another question. There are certain teams that would not have acquired Roberto Osuna after he served 75-game suspension for domestic violence. The Astros did. A lot of people thought that was kind of a cynical act, basically saying we don't care. Whatever the guy has done doesn't matter to us. He's a great performer. We'll take him. Again, other teams did not make that decision. So they didn't win the World Series. Some of this noise will die down, and I'm not calling it noise in the sense of needless noise. It's very legitimate noise. But going forward, it will be interesting to see kind of how these things progress with the Astros. Do they make that same kind of acquisition the next time? Do they calm down, or do they not do what they've done with this person who was taking pictures of the dugout and doing heaven knows what else? Remember, they said they were playing defense, right?
Yeah, right.
Hey, it's all the other teams are worried about. Yeah, all of them are doing stuff. It's just a matter of how much.
Well, it's something that I'll bring up with John McClain of the Houston Chronicle. He joins us in the third hour, but right now I've got Ken Rosenthal from Fox and The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show. You are in Milwaukee now, I assume, correct, sir, for tonight's game? Okay. What do you think? What was Craig Counsell doing with Wade Miley? I know that you've written about it for The Athletic, and I'll talk more about that in a second, but what was that whole gambit with Wade Miley about?
Well, the way the Brewers see this, they have a hard time matching up with the Dodgers from a pitching standpoint. The Dodgers are so deep offensively and so versatile, left-handed hitters, right-handed hitters, bench depth, that it's difficult to get a matchup advantage, a platoon advantage. So what their thinking was, start Miley, or at least announce Miley. The Dodgers will put mostly right-handers in, as they did. All but two of their hitters were right-handed hitters. And then flip the lineup or flip the equation by putting in the right-hander Woodruff, and you have the platoon advantage against all of those right-handed hitters. You force the Dodgers to basically empty their bench. And it's a reasonable thing to do if you're the Brewers because, one, you don't have the starting pitching depth that other teams do. You don't have enough starters to go through a 7-game series. And two, because of the Dodgers' unique grouping of position players. It's very unusual to see all-stars or former all-stars on the bench the way they have them. So that's why they did it. And by doing it, they got Miley tonight on 5 days rest instead of 3 days rest, which would have been the first time in his career he had done that. And they are actually set up quite well from a pitching standpoint tonight. Cater is rested, Jeffress is rested, Knebel is rested from the bullpen's perspective. So this is it. And this is their shot. They had to do these kinds of things to compete with the Dodgers. They've competed well with the Dodgers. Whether it all plays out in their favor, that remains to be seen. But I applauded what they did. I do not have a problem with it at all, and I don't really think baseball fans should have a problem with it. Teams are being creative now, trying to figure out ways to win. It leads to more conversation like the one we're having,
Yes.
and in my view, it's healthy.
Okay. So, and again, I won't put you in the position of predicting, Ken, but before I let you go, when you ask a team that's already made the championship round, who would you like to face of the two teams that they would possibly have a chance to face? And they would always say, well, we'll take whoever we get. Deep down, who are the Red Sox rooting for over these final two games of the NLCS, do you think?
Milwaukee. And it's because of the lack of starting pitching depth and the fact that they have to use all these bodies. Going into this series, the Brewers' biggest fear was that their pitching would be exhausted over 7 games. Now, we've seen some great performances from their entire staff, even guys at the bottom of the staff like Freddie Peralta and Junior Guerra. But can they sustain it over 7 games? Can Hader hold up over 7 games? These are all fair questions, and against the Red Sox, one of the most dynamic offensive teams we've seen in a few years, it would be that much more challenging. The Dodgers, their starters go deeper into games, or at least they have. I don't know if they would against the Red Sox. And their bullpen has performed extremely well, surprisingly well, actually, in this series. So if I'm the Red Sox, I'd rather see the Brewers.
Okay, Ken, really appreciate the chat here from Milwaukee on the day of Game 6. Have a great cast tonight. Really enjoy your work. We'll chat again during the World Series, I hope.
Thanks very much.
You bet. That's Ken Rosenthal.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.